Okay, so welcome to this very, very special episode, the 25th episode of the Path Less Chosen pod, the podcast showing the careers they don't teach you about in school. My name's Sol.
And I'm Jamie.
And today we have a good friend and fellow podcaster, Peter Wood, with us today. And Peter is the mind behind the Graduate Guide. And I will let Jamie tell you exactly what to expect from this episode.
So with this being the 25th episode, it's going to be something a bit different. It's going to be a real interesting discussion around the UK career crisis. It's also going to cover the easiest way to start working in something you actually enjoy. And Pete is going to tell us all about his mission to change the way that society thinks about our careers.
Yes, it was an unbelievable conversation, and just before you give it a listen, we'd really, really appreciate you checking out our Instagram. We post all of our content, all reminders on our Instagram, so please give us a follow on the Path Less Chosen pod on Instagram. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. All right, Pete, thanks so much for coming on. If you could just briefly share what you're up to right now.
So I'm currently building the Graduate Guide, which was originally my passion project at university, and since 2 months ago, so I'm building it full time, which is very exciting. There's a lot of challenges that come with that, but I wouldn't have it any other way. So I'm keen to talk more about this and yeah, probably get to know you guys as well.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I think most of our demographic of listeners will be the people that are interested in what you're doing. So just explain a little bit more detail what exactly the Graduate Guide is and what you're trying to do with it.
Yeah, so I guess for context, it's something that I started in my final year at UCL. I was a history student that didn't know what to do with a history degree, which I think is quite a common problem. And while all my friends around me were going into the likes of consulting and banking and law, I would see these people on LinkedIn or wherever doing these amazing careers, going from A to B to C and having no idea how they did it. But I was just very curious. I thought, while I'm still a student, and to be honest, I probably didn't have the experience to even compete for these top graduate jobs anyway. And so I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to give this a crack. Invited my old head boy onto a podcast that didn't even exist at the time, didn't have a name. And, that was, almost 2 years ago now. Over 100 episodes later, I just really fell in love with every different industry, hearing people's different opinions on careers, whether that's like practical advice on how you can go from A to B to C, or if it's, the actual emotional journey that you go on with a career. I think demystifying what it's all about and making it all seem a bit more accessible. And basically what it's grown into, having delved into different pockets of the startup world, is an events company that puts on what we like to think networking events that really represent what students actually want. And that basically means combining nightlife, sport, all the fun things that monopolize most of students' time, and actually just combining it with careers and genuine career insights, which luckily I've been able to sort of build a network where I can actually say these people, they do know what they're talking about. And yeah, it's really exciting. Obviously, I think when you're building anything, especially a business out of something that wasn't meant to be a business, there are sort of struggles in what your business model is going to be, how you're going to monetize. But really, the Graduate Guide is a movement, I like to describe it as. Instead of really a business, it's trying to give a guide to graduates in whatever way I think is best.
Fantastic. And what I really like looking at your stuff earlier is that you referred to it as you're trying to build that solution to the UK career crisis. So I think it'd be really interesting to know, jumping back to when you started having these thoughts, where when you were doing your history degree, not really sure where it was taking you. At what point did you start thinking, this is the UK career crisis? People like me who are ambitious but don't really know where it's leading them and don't want to go into the corporate world. How did that eventually then lead into something where you thought, I can help other people that are similar to me and start helping people realise to build a community and do something different rather than feeling forced into something?
But yeah, I think my interpretation of a career crisis has it's changed over time, the deeper I've delved into it. But definitely originally it was that, you get told at school, if you get into a good university, then you'll be fine. And then if you do well in your degree, then you'll be fine. And it isn't that simple. You're sort of left to your own devices for 3 years, going out, not really thinking about careers. And all of a sudden everyone has this oh shit moment. And it's those people that have just sort of silently been hacking away at their career in the background that have no problems, while everyone else is playing catch up. And I think that basically just means that everybody goes to do what everyone else is kind of doing. It's that comfort blanket of all applying for the same
100%.
grad schemes, taking, getting those brand names and not really pursuing anything because you want to, but because you think you have to. And like, I don't consider myself ever that guy at school who was like, oh, fuck, why is that guy always getting good grades or whatever? Like, I was very much, academia did not come naturally to me, but it was seeing those people that you always thought had it under control, struggling to get a job. That's when I was like, oh, shit, this is actually affecting everyone. And I'm talking about, a good, UCL here. This is like across the country. The more I've delved into it, like it is, whether you're an international student, being happily having your money taken from university, but then having no, career prospects at the back or the other side of it, or, you're struggling with the financial crisis and you need to you're struggling to even afford yourself any time to really think about what you actually want to do. That there's just so multifaceted, this problem. And I don't think I'll ever claim to be able to solve it. Much like maybe the climate crisis, I will do my best and do my own part in what I believe to be my skills in helping to solve it, because it's something that I'm very passionate about.
Yeah, no, it's spot on, and it's something that we're, as Jamie said, very passionate about. And I completely echo with so many things you said there. I think one of the first things is the fact that, like, you talk about people's passions, and I don't think people think enough about what they really love doing and what they're actually passionate about. And I can definitely lend myself to that, not really thinking evaluatively about what I like doing as opposed to what is the like common path. And I also think, very interestingly as well, like, I picked up on the fact that a lot of these corporate graduate jobs you can try really hard to get into, and if you put all that energy into starting your own business, say the Graduate Guide, or for Jamie going into the sports industry, like, your return on time is so much better. Whereas as I'm sure we've all seen, right, is that all these people are in, like, they can be grinding away for applications and then they just get rejections left, right and centre. And I think a few people I know turn around and were like, why am I trying really hard for something that I actually am not really sure I even like doing? Like, just because everyone around me is grinding to get the next investment banking internship.
I mean, it's that awareness piece, isn't it? It's like, that's what's really lacking. I mean, no one really cares what you actually do in your career at university as much as they might say they do when you come in. Like, you are very much on your own there. And I think you're constantly taught not to let yourself rabbit hole in the education system, where with careers you actually need to do just that. You need to, like, take something and then really dig deeper into everything around it in order to get anywhere with it. And I think I very blankly used to just say that the job market is bad. However, I think what really has happened is it's just moving at such a quick rate, and some industries are making a killing and people aren't aware they're even happening. So obviously there are opportunities. The more I've delved into this, it's not become more clear what I want to do or what I would do if I wasn't building the Graduate Guide. However, it has become clear that there are so many different industries I just wish I knew about from my first year and had even like potentially considered. So yeah, I mean, what do you think, Jamie, about the career?
Yeah, I think from my own personal experience, like, it actually began way before first year. Like you say there, you wish you knew about careers from like the first year of your university. For me, like, the school I went to and looking at like your grades, we got very similar grades, but when I was getting those grades throughout school, I was always pushed down like two avenues. My school was known for sending people to Oxbridge to study like medicine or law stuff. And like, it was never something that really appealed to me, right? And I even ended up applying just because I felt so like pressured to. And they would have Tuesday futures sessions, when I think now looking back on it, I wish those future sessions we would turn up to, they would tell us about all kind of things you could end up doing with your life in the future. But all they pitched it to us was certain things. And I was sent to the Oxbridge group every Tuesday, right? I never wanted to go. So looking back on it, what was the point? And then I went into university and it was the exact same thing. But now rather than like doctors and law, it was everybody was talking about like going into consultancy or like big banks and talking about the big five, the magic circle and all stuff that I still don't really understand. Yeah. And I think even then, like, sat in that environment, I was saying to Sol just before we jumped on, I remember being sat down in like our lounge in third year and people would be talking about how their assessment centres like went, and I couldn't tell you what one looked like right now. And I just don't understand like where the root of that problem is. I'd be interested to hear, like, from the work that you've been doing, if you found anything that you think this is what is causing schools like that and universities like that to channel students into thinking that the only good career to come out of it is a very limited amount of options, and like working in the city, making decent money rather than doing stuff actually that they enjoy and thinking about it when they're much younger.
I mean, yeah, it is it's a bit mad, to be honest. They just haven't at all adapted with the time. A lot of the big renowned universities have sort of rested on their laurels for a long time, I believe. And I don't even think it's particularly controversial or combative to say that. There's a lot of people that think that within the university that I've spoken to as well. But it's difficult for universities to change. They lack funding, even though if we pay a lot of money, we don't always know where it goes. Like they don't have just unlimited money to like delve into every different career path. I think also like there's still a stigma around some careers and how like much success you can actually have in them, which, I think I'm probably not the best person to speak to because I live in such a different world to my mates. Like, a lot of my mates have got into those corporate industries and for them being very successful and, they're on a stable wage and all these other things. Whereas my brain is just all over the place because I don't know what success is anymore. And I think that at that point, it just has to come down to you just working in something that you find fulfilling and that you are allowed to explore your passions with it. And I don't really know if that's answering your question, but it's more just, I think there genuinely are institutions that are changing really quickly with the times, and they are offering really like appropriate education for what you actually want to go to as an end result. But to even know that's, apprenticeships as well, like that was never told to me as something that was like a high achieving person would go to do an apprenticeship. I now listen to it. I'm like 23K a year from 18 years old to work for a brand that you'd probably want to graduate into anyway. And you've got all that real world experience. Like, I just think all these different paths needs to be like, level the playing field in terms of people knowing about them as options and having a fair chance of getting them.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, there's so many places to take that from there, but I think one of the things that I find interesting you saying about the like modern take on careers and the fact that actually, yeah, fair enough, like probably our parents and a lot of the lecturers at university and teachers, to them they're talking about a job market that existed when they were looking at a job market, and it was, you do go and work for a big company now, but with online money and the fact we can even film this podcast remotely now, like there's so many ways to have a great career that aren't based on working in an office. And I think Jamie insufferably will always listen to me talk about like Bali and how great it was, but I think that was the first time that I realised that there's people who make money, but not even just money, who have really fulfilling, cool, interesting careers, who are not based in the city of London, who wear a suit all the time. And that was fascinating to me. And I think one of the conversations that everyone always asks me is like, what do people actually do out there? Like, what is the people's actual careers? And you just don't even understand that they exist here. But you start thinking about it, like, okay, well, that YouTube video that I watched, like someone's probably making money off like actually posting that YouTube video or that podcast. People are paying to be sponsored on that podcast. I don't know if you've seen that as well.
Yeah, well, I think a big reason why those industries have not become something that everybody sees as like particularly desirable yet is that the cringe of doing something different to anyone else. I'm very aware of what, like, especially in a social circle of someone who like has mates that go to the pub and like nightlife and try to be cool and whatever, doing something different and the cringe that comes with that. Like, I've had to confront that. I think the way of overcoming it is, I don't think you have to necessarily go all guns blazing and put yourself out there, immediately in the fullest self. But I think you can start like playing with it and toying around with the idea that, you can put yourself out there and you ultimately will end up being that guy that people say, oh, how did you do it in the end? Like that's something that's very much happened to me. I saw these people on LinkedIn. There are a lot of bad players that make you think, oh, it's just an inherently cringy platform. Everyone speaks in emojis, all these kind of things. And it's just not the truth. Like, everyone on there is a real, genuine person. Like, I've done all my episodes in person. And the more and more you realise that these other people doing it, and these are the people that have been put themselves out there for longer, like, they're just normal people that came to the realisation that, like, a lot of these, like, sayings, for example, that get, like, dismissed as cringe, or, like, one of these quotes that people would like, hang up on their wall and you're like, what a load of rubbish. Like, you realise that the reason they become quotes is because there's genuinely some kind of wisdom in there that's been generated. They're not just randomly made and published. Like, people genuinely do think that, and when you start saying it yourself, it's a really weird feeling. It's like, oh, I can't believe I just said that, but it's actually true. So I think you just have to try and not think about that and ease yourself into it. And ultimately you can start carving out those careers, like being a YouTuber or being a podcaster or whatever it is. Ultimately just following your passion does involve putting yourself out there. And I think it's worth it. It's so worth it.
I couldn't agree with you more. It was like it's same as me meeting these people who I was like, wow, this is bonkers. These people actually like they actually do it, and I'm just sat up across from them. And then tomorrow they're going to go and film a YouTube video where they say a load of things that I think are cringy, but then it's the same person that I'm going to meet in the evening. I don't know if you had the experience with cringe as well, Jamie.
Not just cringe, but also it was interesting. Like you mentioned, there's like a bit of a stigma around it. And I think like I massively concur with that. I think there was times where I look back at university, and because I was doing such different things to what everyone else around me was doing, there was like a bit of skepticism and like people saying like it seemed to be a waste of my time. And particularly I think it starts like with my parents as well, because they saw football as a career that like you can't really do well in unless you're a big footballer. You know, working in football seems a bit of a dream career. And then there was times at university where I was shooting off on a Tuesday afternoon to go and watch the under-16s play like 3 hours away. And I think it's because when you start out, it's the massively unglamorous side of it, but it's the kind of hard yards you have to put in at the start, then hopefully it will pay off in the future. And I think the same probably now with like Sol, for example, where our friendship group, when Sol started totally changing his whole like social media personality, I think people thought like, where has this come from? And there was like a bit of backlash, so I'm sure like you agree with that. And I think the reason with that was because people are suddenly skeptical when they see like your first few videos might not get however many views, as I've reminded Sol a few times, but I understand fully that like that's where you start. And it was the same with me. I have to watch the under-16s to then eventually in a few years time hopefully get somewhere that's a bit more significant. And I think the whole stigma around it is people thinking they don't want to step out of that comfort zone, start taking on like the small, like less glamorous bits to try and make something happen in the future. They'd rather do what everyone else is doing now, which like you say is a bit of a safety net where they're all going to a good university, they'll probably get accepted into a decent enough job in the city. So why don't we just do that because everyone else is? But then you look at the people who are doing incredible things that we talk about and read books about and look at their tweets and their motivational quotes, and they're the people who exactly went against the grain. So I think it's massive, that whole stigma around things, definitely.
Well, I think if anybody's listened to this and they think, oh, okay, that probably is me, I probably am ready to take on doing something different. Like, the only thing that's actually going to make you stick with it and not think it was the most embarrassing thing you ever did was completely having your why locked down for doing it. Because if you don't, it is very difficult to push through that. I mean, for me, like, there's a lot of things that don't add up when you look at my career. Like, I've grown a pretty good following on LinkedIn, but nowhere else. And I've not done the traditional podcast vanity metric pursuit, you know, making loads of shorts and YouTube and TikTok and, you know, speaking like, hey, what's up, guys? Like, because, yeah, for me, that still is like a little bit of a stretch too far. And I think what the beauty of what like LinkedIn allowed me to do is that I knew that I just wanted to meet these people. I wanted to find a way to meet these people. And they're not accessible on your Instagram, your TikToks, but on LinkedIn, they're all real, genuine people in control of their own accounts. And, you know, you could be like a massive person on Instagram with a very normal following on LinkedIn, and you can shoot your shot. You can describe why you think like it's worth giving their time to you. And you just never know. Like, obviously, when I first started, it was very hard to persuade people to come on. But like, I think in my 8th episode, I got a managing director at Google, which, you know, was just one of the many people that I messaged. And from there, it was kind of like everybody just understood why I was doing it. But yeah, that's a whole nother learning that I'd be interested in touching on, is like the actual art of outreach, because that in itself is another thing that might stop you from doing something like with you even and I are doing, for example.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was something that I count myself as quite fortunate, which I know not many people can say during COVID, but I count myself as quite fortunate during the whole lockdown period, because I started off like working in a service station at Morrison's because my mum and dad were key workers, so they said you've got to be one too. So I worked in a service station, and after 2 weeks I just said, look, let me quit. Let me go home, and I promise I won't just waste the next however many months we're locked in. I will like try and plan something for after university. And so every day was just like blitzing LinkedIn. And I found that like, especially during the times that then like consequently and afterwards the next couple of years when other people were maybe being a bit more skeptical and like telling me to maybe go down a more conventional route, during that time, during COVID, when I was outreaching and speaking to people who were in the industry, I was managed to get on a few phone calls and stuff. They were then the kind of people that I leaned on during that time, because I had a relationship with them, and they were encouraging me and making me see that this was possible. So I'd be interested in like your whole approach to the outreach side, and particularly now that you're going to move into a space where you're going to offer yourself as a coach. I found so much solace, particularly in one mentor called Dr. Urquhart Sogat, who is like gave me all of his advice, all of his wisdom. I don't think I would then have pursued the career as much if I didn't have his assistance on it. And now that you're going to be offering that to other people, I'd be interested to know like how you see like the importance of having someone to lean on like that, and a coach and a mentor that you can speak to and trust that has gone down a less conventional path to support you and make you realise it's actually possible.
Hey, so sorry to interrupt the podcast, but we just wanted to say that the algorithm on your podcast provider works on the number of positive reviews that a podcast has. So if you wouldn't mind just going to the podcast and rating it however many stars you want, obviously, hopefully, ideally 5, but if you want to give it 1, that's better than nothing. So a few stars for the podcast would be unbelievable, and it would massively, massively help out getting this podcast to as many people as possible. And now back to the episode.
Yeah, well, I mean, so on the outreach point, I would say that the biggest piece of advice I could be given from the very beginning was that, like, you know, if you're anyone, you just want to be treated like a normal human being. No AI, no chat GPT, no eloquently written messages. If you're asking something of someone, they just want to know who you are, why you're not bullshitting your interest in speaking to them, which building a personal brand helps with, because you can go on there and be like, oh, okay, he's actually been talking about or doing what he says he is. And then you just ask them the question. And I think that there's a lot of commentary that goes around about like the persistence of outreach, and you know, if you get rejected once, you know, go back again, keep messaging. And I think there's actually like, and I've had to realize this the hard way, that if somebody doesn't want to speak to you or give you help then, or come on your podcast then, it's not because they'll never want to. It's because right now you're like, they're maybe having an off day, or you know, at this current moment in time, they're really busy, or it's just not, you've just not ultimately. And I would have loved to repurpose a lot of that feeling of like, oh God, why is no one replying to me, into, okay, if they're not replying to me, there's a reason why, and there's something that I can prove. And the biggest validating thing of that was I reached out to, like, after getting the Google one, reached out to the managing director of BCG, and I was like, yeah, he's going to come on the podcast now. I mean, look who I've just had on, even though it was like recorded on crappy mics and you know, whatever. And he was like, no, I'm busy, but sounds great. Good luck. I was like, what? I can't believe that. And then I don't know what that delusional confidence was all about. And then, you know, 10 months later, after doing loads more interviews and sort of maybe earning my badges a little bit more, he actually reached out to me and was like, I don't know if I'm probably the coolest guest to have on anymore, but I would love to come on the podcast if you still have me. And I'm like, and then I was just like, okay, that is a real like lesson there in you know, actually like respecting other people's time and opinions, and not wanting to fast track to something, because you know, I think this generation does get taught a lot that you can do things really quickly and imminently, but I think there is something in the process and the journey which is really fun, and something that is a very important lesson. And the second part of that question then is, you know, once you have got that relationship, once you have built that initial bit of rapport with someone, how do you actually cultivate it into a relationship that can, you know, be of value to you in your career or personal life or whatever it is? I think there is some similarities in the first bit and the second bit of this question, but ultimately you have to understand that everybody's got their own thing going on. And you're not meant to just, they're never going to just take you and mold you into this perfect person. And that shouldn't really be the case. They should be there to act as a guide, a person you can ask questions at any time, big, small, stupid, or like. And I think mentorship is probably the most powerful thing you can have in your career if you really understand what you're wanting to get out of that relationship. Because if you don't, again, it's going to be like you're going to burn bridges and you're not going to get what you want out of it. So those would be some two big takeaways that I'd give to listeners.
And I actually think a lot of what it comes back to is just being like actually just doing things. Like I think a lot of the stories that you tell, like a lot of them, what people don't necessarily hear in what you're saying is that you've actually proactively reached out to someone and actually dreamed big, but done that dream big. And I think that's what stops most people is they're like, well, why the hell would the BCG like managing director reply to me, but being able to have that pop up in the first place is something that I think a lot of people don't have or don't realise is possible. So hopefully listening to this, they realise that, you know, those things are possible. I think we've all got those stories, and, you know, Jamie, had you not messaged Urquhart all the way back in lockdown, I think you could probably fairly say that your career wouldn't be where it is now, right?
Yeah, like definitely, and not just him, but like the volume of phone calls that I ended up having. And I think it's important to mention that like you don't always get the responses, because there were many times where like I reached out to people and I probably had a very low success rate, and I fully understand why. Like I think I probably slightly disagree with your take on the like not badgering people, I think that's the wrong word, but like the following up. But I think that's probably because of like industry specific. I don't know whether it varies like from what people are doing in different areas, but like in sport, for example, I found like I would send like those initial messages. The majority of people wouldn't come back to me. I fully understand why. Like I don't demand respect, particularly not like 4 years ago. Like I was an absolute nobody. Why would they give up their time, particularly in an industry where there's a lot of competition? And like why would they then share and help and like share their wisdom with me when like I could end up being competition? It didn't really make sense. But there are good people out there, I guess, like yourself now with coaching people careers, where they were willing to help you. But I think there was no issue with consistently messaging them, as long as when you were messaging them, you were actually adding some kind of value to them. And I think one of the biggest learnings I had, which I was quite lucky to have early on, was with a guy called Daniel G, who said to me, before you ask for help from others, see how you can help them first. It taught me to, before I jumped on any call, trawl through their LinkedIn, their Instagram, whatever their like personal brand is presented on, figure out something that maybe I could help them on, or at least like comment on in an interesting way that makes them think, you know, this guy's worth replying to, rather than asking for the bog standard, how did he get into the job? How do I do it? Like, what should I do next? They don't want to give up half an hour of their time just to help you and assist on that, but they would allow you to repeatedly message them if you were adding value. And I think that's eventually how I got replies from some people. So I think it probably does vary. But yeah, interesting to hear your thoughts on it. And I think I can see why some people wouldn't want to be pestered, and you've got to respect their time. But yeah, that's just how my experience, I think, differed.
Well, I think you said something really great there in, you know, slightly disagreeing to what I said. I think that the reason why it's called the Graduate Guide and not the Graduate, you know, I'm telling you what to do, this is the only way possible, other than the fact that's not a very catchy name, is that there is so much career advice out there. There are so many wannabe gurus. There are so many different people who have done things in different ways. And ultimately, I never wanted, you know, I actually have a fear of ever coming across like any kind of guru, because I want to sit there as a guide. I want to have authentic conversations with people with different point of views. And, you know, I think I lack quite a lot of things in many ways, but I do feel like my form of learning, maybe my USP, is the ability to be a sponge within a conversation and take and sieve out what I believe to be true and what resonates with me most and what will be most useful to me, and not disregard the others, but just understand that, you know, people are inherently different, and if you don't start embracing your own self, one, you'll never, you know, truly be happy, but also, you know, if you're trying to build a business, for example, like delegation and empowering of other people is literally the number one thing that you can do to make progress. And I've, you know, massively realized for the Graduate Guide to get anywhere of the level that I want it to, it's got to be about empowering other people to do things better than you, because you don't have the time and all the expertise to do everything well.
Spot on. I think I completely agree with all that. I think if I was someone listening to us talking right now, we're all talking about doing things and taking actions and going into the right direction and messaging people. But you said something, Pete, a bit ago, which was about you got to work out what your why is first. And I think you two could be people who someone could look at and be like, they just always knew they were going to be a football agent, or they just always knew they were going to do a podcast about careers. And I'm sure that wasn't actually the case. So how did you get into a place where it looks like now you're following your passion?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, Jamie, but like this, I've said the exact same thing about so many people in my lifetime, and it's like it's always relative, isn't it? And I think the more you can actually speak to someone that understands stuff in real life in a normal conversation, the more you can actually understand what context they're operating within and how many years or how many extra things they've had to do to get to that point. Like, you know, there are stories that exist of people just saying they're going to do something and then relentlessly going at it until they do. But like, I'd say that's probably the 1% of people, if not less. And for me, I think some people are just very proactive and very automated in what they do, but I think a lot of people, and like myself, like I'm quite reactive, annoyingly so. And the only thing to prompt reactivity is to like kind of put your back against the wall at times, and like put yourself into uncomfortable positions to then start doing things. Otherwise, I would just still be in the uni student mindset of drinking and going out and not thinking about my career.
When I was reading your stuff earlier, Peter, it resonated with me when you said what you want to help people do is those that are really ambitious and want to do something really cool with their life, but they don't know where to actually apply their ambition. And I think that was probably me back then. I knew I've always had, and speaking about cringe earlier, Soul knows this full well, I've got a life plan on my phone, which I've had on my phone since I was like early teen. And it said a load of things on it that would never ever be possible unless I did something different. I couldn't just go and work in a city job, but I was like, my life plan's never going to get ticked off, and I'm nowhere near it yet, but hopefully like going down a different path will eventually get me there. And I think then when it came to COVID, I realised that if I'm going to do something like that, the ambition has to be placed somewhere. But for me, it made absolutely no sense to then suddenly be interested in what the magic circle was, what the big five were, when I never showed an interest in it before. And because I would happily spend all my weekends and stuff watching sport, it made sense that that was an area I target. And so like the biggest motivation for me was like, I just love watching sport the whole time. It doesn't feel like I'd ever have to work if I could get into it. So why not, really?
You know, the irony of all this anyway, having a podcast called The Path I've Chosen and doing and exploring alternative careers, is that speaking to corporate heads of recruitment and global heads of early careers, they all just say they want to see you stand out in your interviews. So it's not enough to just do the normal things that get you into these corporate standard law jobs. Like, you still need to have done the stuff and putting yourself out there and doing the alternative things to even get those jobs. So I don't think like this, what we're saying is only applicable to a very certain type of person. I think it's genuinely everyone should try and live life with as much curiosity and, you know, excitement as possible, because otherwise what's the point? Like, I mean, there's so many bad things to worry about. Of course there are, like no one said there's not, but if you are not trying to like have fun and be the best version of yourself and achieve the greatest things, then what is the point, is my attitude.
But I genuinely think it's so true, right? And I think a lot of people will spend all their life trying to game an application. I think this is partly like how I've ended up where I am now, which is like you spend your whole time trying to be like, all right, I'm going to artificially inflate my interest in something to try and get into a program, and actually you then get there and you're like, well, because I didn't follow any of my natural curiosity along that path, I've ended up somewhere where that natural curiosity doesn't exist because I've faked it almost to there. I think that is one of the biggest problems with the application hunt and the application race that exists at all of these unis. You get swelled into this mass application pool where actually you're like, well, I don't know why I'm in this. Like I'm only in this because my mate's in it and I want to get it before him.
Yeah, for those that label me a wanker for the statement and the rant I went on before, like, and that's perfectly reasonable. I think it's important to actually say like the only way you're going to get into that mindset is by having as many of your like personal life ducks in order. And when I say that, I mean like I've not always had the best people around me or the most supportive people, but I went to a university full of ambitious people because I wanted to be surrounded by them. And once I had them, yeah, there's still like going to be gimmicks and piss taking and whatever, but ultimately everybody wants to do well, and everyone's going to do it in their own weird, unique way at some point in their career at least. So I just feel like I feel very lucky that I was able to, you know, recover from the pandemic, like get in a relationship, like get my head screwed on a little bit before I even started thinking any of this was possible in a career sense.
Yeah, I think Jamie's like a massive example of that, like while we're at uni, because, you know, you're surrounded by really intelligent people, but then at the same time, like Jamie, you might say, you know, you're surrounded by what is quote unquote a good university, but at the same time, I think most people around you said that what you were doing was kind of foolish and stupid. So maybe on the reverse point of that, some of these places that are so-called bright and ambitious might not be pushing people in the right direction. I don't know if you found that, Jamie.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's like the most nurturing environment, but I think like it's not just the top universities. I think it's just as a culture and as a society. You know, you're pushed into the whole 9 to 5 narrative. Like everyone understands that that's the job. Everyone lives for the weekend. Like your content sold talking about how it's crazy that we've got into this mindset where everyone wakes up on a Monday and they can't wait for the Friday to come. And I always found that like insane and something that would never appeal to me. Unfortunately, doing like what I'm doing now, I watch football on a Saturday, so it blows apart like that whole thing. I'm suddenly working on a Saturday. But also to what you said earlier, Sol, where like you're inflating, like false inflation of something that you're interested in. I've always found really interesting because I would like walk into people's rooms or like have a conversation with people, and still to this day, like I was chatting to someone last week who was going for an interview, and they were told in the previous one they'd done they didn't have enough like real world practical knowledge of what was going on, and this was in the legal field. So I found it mad that then in preparation for her next interview, she was just blitz reading as many legal papers as she possibly could. And I just found that insane that like you had to turn up to an interview and pretend you knew absolutely everything. And I was guilty of it when I interviewed for university. I read up a load of politics when I'd never really done like politics stuff before, because the degree I knew I was going to get asked questions in politics, and I had to kind of pretend I knew what I was talking about based on reading a few. But then when it came to working in the football space, like people would say, and there's again referring back to Daniel G, a lot of the stuff he says is just begin by reading as many pieces of content you can per day. And when I first heard that, it came dead easy because every morning I would have Sky Sports News on anyway, and I would be reading the BBC Sport gossip and stuff like that. So suddenly I was already reading the stuff and I didn't have to inflate any kind of interest. And I always found that so interesting that then in a university environment and amongst friends that were looking to go into the city job, it's not something they would have done as a kid. Whereas I bet they all probably watched football and sport, especially our friendship group. So everyone watched football and sports as a kid, but it never occurred to them that maybe that could be something they'd go into a career in. And I just find the whole, like why would you force it to then pretend that you enjoy something when really you'd rather be doing something you're actually passionate about? But culture just and society doesn't really seem to allow it as much.
I don't think anyone is saying that here is that they've never bluffed their way through something, or like, you know, I lived a lot of my life without any passion for anything other than like things that weren't useful for my career, like FIFA or whatever it was at that period of my life. But ultimately, like, I think the problem is just accepting that. For me, that's the problem, is like accepting that you will never feel passionate about your work. And I think the more we can try and change that attitude, at the very least, the more people will, you know, they'll go to the university studies, they'll tick the boxes, and they'll go to their 9 to 5, but they won't come home after that and just think, oh, thank God I got that done. Now let's do anything to take my mind off my career. Instead, like, come back and think, okay, well, you know, if this is what's making me upset, let's try and actually rejig that and change that and feel passionate about something, even if you have no idea where to start in that. I think it's, you know, people have their own ways of doing it. Like if you're an introvert, it's probably from, you know, looking online at various different things and, you know, following rabbit holes of the people that you consume a lot of content of, or if it's in person, it's just spending more time, you know, actually in conversation with other people and digging a bit deeper than you normally would.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And I think also what is important to be like conscious of is there is like some people see like the good sides of it, and they see a lot of positives in doing that lifestyle. I know a lot of people that do enjoy living in London. They'll do the whole office corporate environment, especially at this age, because they feel it is just building experience at this stage to then go on to something in the future. But they get to do the post-work drinks on a Thursday. They get to like socialise in that environment, and then they live for the weekend and enjoy it in a big city. So like there's a lot of people that I'm sure would be happy enough in it. But I think what's important is like, if they do like a genuine proper introspection, no like denial to themselves, are they actually doing something that's like making them feel fulfilled? And if they could pick or choose, like would they really enjoy it? Then I just don't know how many would actually say, yeah, you know what, this is like my dream, or would I rather do something else?
Yeah, I think what made me so interested in this topic is there's this really big anti-9 to 5, anti-corporate, anti-London culture. And it's basically, you either have to be sitting as a digital nomad on a beach, or you have to be working in a tie in an office. And the people who are sitting on the beach are doing what they love, and the people in the office are slaves in the corporate grind. And what really rephrased it for me is actually my brother. Like, his dream, his genuine dream, is to work as like a banker in a big bank for a company looking at stocks, and could not get my head around it. And I was like, you're forced into doing this because of everything you read about bankers being cool and all that sort of thing. And he's like, no, I actually really love it. And then I realised that actually what your passion and what you're interested in, what your job, your dream job looks like, is different for everyone. So we can't look and see people getting on the tube and thinking like they're doing things that they hate doing, but actually it's like, find what you love doing and then do it. Don't necessarily assume that someone's in an office or someone's on a beach and one's better than the other.
Yeah, and this whole conversation we're talking about, it's been really interesting taking these perspectives and actually applying it to my business. In that, if my ultimate aim is to help everyone find a career they're passionate about, like if their genuine passion is in that corporate industry and that's what makes them feel fulfilled and happy, then I'm interviewing the CEO of IBM soon in the next couple of weeks, and like my line of questioning in that is not, it's not going to be to, I can't understand that at all, or like, or how do you necessarily like get a job in IBM. I just want people to know exactly what they're in for and increase that transparency so that you're not guessing when you apply for these really rigorous hard grad schemes. You're actually saying, okay, that sounds exactly like me. That person that I heard from there is like said loads of things that I resonated with. And I think, the first step, of course, is not the be all or end all, but it should be more important than people are saying right now. A lot of people will be like, just start somewhere and you'll figure it all out. But a lot of people also get trapped. They go in something, they bury it so deep, their dream or their passion, that they don't even know how to refine it. And yeah, like I'm really on this mission at as early an age as possible. How much can I increase that transparency between what a job is advertised as and what it actually is in practice?
Yeah, mate, that's absolutely spot on, and we absolutely love your mission on this podcast. It's we listen to all the episodes and love what you're about. So just finishing on that, what's the real dream for you and the Graduate Guide moving forward?
Yeah, well, I think what's cool about the Graduate Guide is that honestly, there's no expectation of what it could and should be. It's completely up to me where I take it, and for the difficulties that come with that and the not knowing that, it really just allows me to build my own dream career within it. And like, for example, I'm a massive festival goer. Like, I love music and I love events. If people have been following what I do on LinkedIn, there's a lot of content about the events I'm putting on, and I think they are very different. Like, for example, we just rented out a football stadium in North London, had 1,000 people sign up to it, and it was just like, I had DJs there, we had a load of founders and CEOs and a real mixture and variety of people, and allowing students to actually just meet these people that are normally like dressed up in a suit and very scary to talk to, and just be like, no, like go grab a beer with them, go have a barbecue with them. And I think, yeah, there is a level of delusional optimism in that, and it's going to take a lot of fine tuning and iterating this. But honestly, just like the idea of making careers more accessible and fun and reinstalling people's faith in careers by just letting people do what they like to do anyway, tying in careers where and when possible is really the dream. And I don't know what it will look like. It will change month on month, week on week. It does currently change day on day, but like I do just get to wake up every day and think, right, who am I going to message to make something happen? Who am I going to spend my whole day with brainstorming? And luckily I've got a co-founder who's far more competent than me at actually getting things done. I'm very much the ideas person and the visionary, and she's the one who says you can't do that, you can do that. And I think together and the team we're building, we'll be able to achieve some version of what we're hoping this can become.
I love that. No, I seriously love that. I think it's going in such a amazing direction. I hope the Devon Postal Service extends as far as getting my invite for your next event, definitely.
Yeah.
But no, I think the whole direction the company's going is the exact mission like we want to do as well. Like when you answered the previous question as well about transparency, when we're trying to speak to these people, we also like ask them what's the hardest bits and stuff. And yeah, they're doing really unusual careers that on the surface people look at and think that's really cool. Like the example recently where we spoke to someone who basically just travels the world diving with like whale sharks as a living. But actually, there's a lot of stuff that is like difficult in her life. She's always traveling. She's never really got a stable base. And sometimes she looks at her friends with envy and things like that. So everything you're doing, I think, is the right way to go about it, just to open people's eyes to the fact that these careers do exist.
I was just going to add on to that. Like, I could very easily sit here with my head up my own arse and say, like, I'm not going on a podcast that's also exploring alternative careers. But like, I think that is the most like backwards way of thinking. And it really like, this is such a big problem. And there's so many people that need this help. And there's no way that even, there's no way us three here can do anywhere near as much as we want to, like, especially on a global level. It's just not possible. So the more you can band together, like, luckily this early careers higher education space is very collaborative and it's very young and forward thinking. And I don't know if you found that already, but I think that's the only thing that's going to make a change, us sort of coming together and trying to do stuff together.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think when Sol first mentioned that like you would be interested in coming on, I said to Sol, like, I hope he doesn't see us as competition, because like you say, it's much better like if we're all actually, we've got the same mission. Why would you then not like kind of band together? And actually to hear your thoughts and perspectives on it now has been really interesting. So Sol will probably thank you properly in a second, but I'll jump in with the final question, which we ask all our guests. So keen to hear your thoughts on this as well. If you were to go back to the start and maybe when you were doing the history degree and thinking about where your next steps were, one thing you would do the same, one thing you would do differently, and then one thing you tell yourself to motivate yourself.
Yeah, I think one thing I would do the same is pick London as a university destination, because I was told by everyone, you don't need to go to London. It's where you'll end up eventually. And I was like, well, I personally think London is such a melting point of, diversity, different opinions, like people trying to do stuff. And the earlier I can get myself there, the more likely I am to make anything happen, even if I don't know what that is yet. One thing I would change is, very obviously I would start doing all of this much younger. I think like what I realized is, when I was in my third year doing a history degree, I was still doing a history degree in my first year. Like there was no separating factor to me starting then or anything. I could have, COVID is probably a fair reason not to have done it, at least the way I did it. However, just thinking about careers and challenging things a bit more and having, embracing my curiosity a little bit more when I was younger, I think would have been massively advantageous. One thing to motivate myself. Probably I've been doing this for 2 years, all in all, almost. And although things have felt very slow at times, if I actually look at 2 years and what you could not do in 2 years versus what I have actually done, like, I think just taking that like screen grab of, okay, this is only what you've done 2 years. Like, think about what you do when you multiply that by 10. I think that I find that very exciting. And as long as I stay on this sort of track of ambition and motivation, then I'm sure I will do something that I'm proud of.
I love that. And I think you've got a very, very noble cause, mate. And from the first time I chatted to you, I could tell that you felt passionate about it, but it's like the constant churning out of interesting, cool, varied topics. I know you're making a big difference to the people you put the stuff out to, and looking forward to following you. And this chat lived up to all its expectations. I'm hoping people who listened to it enjoyed it, and there's definitely a round two to have in a few months' time when we keep. Come on, there's so much to discuss about the topic, right?
Yeah. No, thank you for having me. Yeah, it was a real pleasure.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, what a brilliant guest to have on. I think for him to come on and share the exact kind of mission and mindset that we do, he's trying to open people's eyes to different career opportunities. I think it was fantastic to get his perspective, and also interesting just to have it as a general discussion between us of all of our experiences and what's led us to doing what we're doing in the Path Less Chosen pod and the Graduate Guide, really. So I know there's plenty of key takeaways, but if you can pick a couple, maybe, Sol?
Yeah, mate, there's a lot to be said for that episode. It was like a chat conversation more than an interview, which I think was really cool. I will go for the first one that I loved, and I think we're both about this a lot, but I think it's so important and such a blocker to people like achieving things they want to, which is the importance of actually just dreaming big and messaging people who can be useful to you. Like, he spoke about the fact that he messaged the MD of Google and then the managing director of BCG, like two of the biggest companies in the world, and he's some guy he had 10 episodes maximum, I think, when he messaged those people. So I think the actual people are actually closer than you think, and people are also willing to help you a lot more than you might think. And that's, I think, a takeaway from your journey as well as his as well, that you can really, really benefit by just being a bit ambitious and trying to get in contact with some of these inspirations.
Yeah, no, I think especially if you're already not ridiculously busy every day and you're not doing something that you really enjoy, why would you not just shoot your shot? Like, just take the chance, and if people don't reply, you've got nothing to lose. But if you've got a spare moment, just decide to send a few people some messages and see if anyone gets back to you. There's really nothing to lose. I like his whole approach to that for sure. Okay, I think the biggest one for me is a kind of whole takeaway from a lot of the discussion that we have with him is just people should just be judgment free towards what anyone is doing. Like, whether, I know we're probably come across as a podcast that is criticizing the corporate world or whatever, but if you genuinely are in it, and when you do a full introspection of yourself and the work that you're doing, if you can genuinely, without any denial, honestly tell yourself that you really enjoy it and that's what you want to do, then it should be a totally judgment-free zone. You know, go ahead and do that. Like, fair play to you. You've done well to get in that career, and that's what you want to do. But if it's not, then go into doing whatever you want and take some risks, do some bits, and grind at the bottom and do the hard bits and stuff to start. That's what you and I are doing at the moment. Hopefully it pays off in the future. We don't know if it will. But when we're doing it now, everyone around us and how we approach other people's careers, we should be judgment-free towards it. Everyone should just be doing what they enjoy without the fear of any kind of stigma or cringe like we discussed in the podcast.
Spot on. I got stuck in a few conversations in the last few weeks where they kind of feel a bit offended when I talk about what I'm doing, because I'm kind of slagging off the corporate journey, and I definitely have had to have a bit of a realisation that, like, there's a lot of people who they genuinely want to do what the corporates are doing as much as that is. You know, there's also probably a bit of bias towards people in the corporate hating what people are doing on a beach in Bali, but I think in general, if we can create a culture where there's no judgment, then spot on. I agree with that. My last one, if you don't mind me doing the last one, I think the thing that, and I said it in the episode, I think that the thing that underpins every single thing that we were all saying is just having an attitude of doing things, like going out and doing things. And that's what Pete said. Like, he started off messaging someone when he didn't really have a podcast, and then he started off, and then now he's doing events, and then he's doing a bit of coaching, and all he's doing is just trying things. And I think there's so much paralysis of analysis, where you just sit there and just go, I'm not really sure what to do. But the more things you do, the more things you work out what sticks, what doesn't stick, what you enjoy doing, what you don't enjoy doing. I think that was my biggest takeaway of how he grew the graduate guide, how you found your, like, what you really like doing, your purpose. And I think it's a great takeaway for anyone stuck thinking, I don't know what to do, is just go and do things and don't worry too much about what those things are. Just go and do things and you'll find something that you like.
Yeah, I think it comes with a word of warning. Like, when I consider that point, I totally agree. And I think with anyone like looking to go down a slightly path less chosen or into something that they feel they would be really interested in and enjoy as a career, it definitely makes sense. Rather than just like coming back from the job that you're not enjoying, sitting doing nothing, kind of thinking, oh, it would be nice if I did something different. Sitting and doing nothing, of course, that makes no sense. People should go out and do stuff. But then I think there's also just a point to be made that it can become a bit haphazard. You might be all over the place, etc. What I like that he did is that he had a very clear purpose. And when he was doing these reach outs, it was to grow like the graduate guide. So I think he's in a position where he knows what he wants and what he wants to get out of the graduate guide to share with people. And everything he's doing is towards that, but he's not just sitting thinking about doing it. He's doing it to progress that. So definitely when you do get into that mindset, go out and do everything, but also make it targeted, I would add to your point. Okay, good. Yeah, I think we could do a lot more takeaways from that conversation. So we've done well to get it down to 3. So to begin with, your first one was just to shoot a shot. People are actually closer than you think. The second one was to be judgment-free about what people are doing for their careers. And the final one is just to take action and start doing things that might lead you down the career that you actually want.
Lovely. Well summed up, mate. Very good episode. Looking forward to chatting to him again, for sure. And you can check the graduate guide, everything that they're doing in the show description, and catch you next week. Okay, thank you very much for listening to the podcast and appreciate you getting to the end of the podcast. Just wanted to say that it is a massive help for us getting our podcast out. If you give us a follow on social media, it will take you 5 seconds. Go to @ThePathLessChosenPod on Instagram. We put loads of effort into making sure that all of the content we put out on there is really useful, really relevant, and also it keeps you up to date on when we release all our episodes and who our next guests are. So if you give us a follow on @ThePathLessChosen, that would be massively appreciated. Thank you.